Hello, everyone. I'm the mysterious man who will share with you tales of the supernatural that I have personally heard, as well as stories sent to me from all over. Today, I bring you a story I was told, and for this retelling, I've changed the names of the characters involved. Now, please, listen to the story of the ghost in the hospital. The CR Hospital, one of the largest and oldest hospitals in Saigon, is not only a place where thousands of patients have been saved, but it also holds chilling memories of souls unable to move on. They say that at night, this hospital has an eerie atmosphere, and many ghost stories are woven around it. But the scariest one must be about the operating room where nurses and doctors avoid entering after dark. A new nurse at CR Hospital was passionate about caring for the sick. She was assigned to the surgery department and was about to start her first night shift there. During the day, the hospital was bustling, filled with noise and the movement of people. But as night fell, the air grew strange. The hallways fell silent, and only the footsteps of night shift workers echoed. And had heard the rumors about the hospital, especially about operating room No. 04, which her colleagues warned her to stay away from at night. But didn't believe in ghosts. She told herself it was just a story to scare the newbies. That night, she worked alongside Linda, a seasoned nurse. Usually, Linda would share some of the hospital's eerie tales, but tonight, she was unusually quiet. "Why do you seem so down today?" Anne asked out of curiosity. Linda shook her head, a cold glint in her eyes. "You're new. There are things you don't know. Just focus on doing your job and don't be too curious." Linda's words made Anne uneasy, but she didn't dare ask more. At 11 p.m., an emergency call rang out. A critical surgery was needed immediately. The surgical team gathered quickly, and was tasked with preparing the operating room. She hurried to the surgical area, but when she arrived at operating room No. 05, where the surgery was supposed to take place, it was locked. With no other choice, Anne had to open operating room No. 04, despite feeling some fear about what she had heard. She told herself they were just baseless rumors. Operating room No. 04 was dark and chilly, and felt an icy draft as she switched on the lights. Everything in the room was old, covered in dust, as though no one had used it for a long time. She began preparing the equipment, trying to ignore the eerie feeling that surrounded her. But as she was cleaning, she heard a faint noise coming from the far end of the room. She stopped, holding her breath, and listened. The sound came again, louder this time. It was like a distant groan. She looked toward the door, but saw no one. The air seemed to grow colder and heavier, and took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She stepped closer to the corner where the sound had come from, but as she approached, the lights began to flicker, then went out completely, shrouding the room in darkness. Only the frantic pounding of her heart broke the silence. She fumbled for her flashlight in her pocket, but just then, a cold hand lightly touched her shoulder and turned sharply. and in the darkness, she saw a faint figure standing silently by the operating table, a woman in a white lab coat, her long hair hanging down, obscuring her face. Terrified, Anne stepped back, but the woman stood still, unmoving, and wanted to scream, but her voice was stuck in her throat. Just then, the lights came back on, and the woman vanished as if she had never been there. Anne stood there, panting, her heart racing. She tried to collect herself and quickly left the room. As she walked out, she bumped into Dr. George, the head surgeon. Seeing Anne's pale face, he asked, "What happened?" Anne stammered as she recounted what had just occurred. But instead of being surprised, Dr. George just looked at her for a long moment before saying, "You met Sister Helen." "Who is Sister Helen?" Anne asked, bewildered. Dr. George sighed. "Sister Helen was one of the best nurses here, but a few years ago, she passed away from exhaustion during a late-night surgery. Since then, Operating Room No. 04 has been rumored to be haunted. Many people have seen her standing by the operating table as if she's still trying to finish her work, and felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't want to believe it, but the truth about Sister Helen's death and the stories from her colleagues made it impossible to deny. From that moment on, Anne avoided Operating Room No. 04 whenever she could. Yet every time she passed by, she still felt as if someone was watching her from within the darkness. 1 week later, Anne was assigned another night shift. She tried to stay calm, not letting her fear affect her work. That night, the hospital was even quieter than usual. Anne walked down the hall, trying to avoid thinking about Room No. 04. But then, from a distance, she saw a faint light coming from the room. Her heart pounded as she picked up her pace, trying to avoid seeing anything strange in that room. But just as she passed by, the door opened. In that instant, Anne felt a bone-chilling draft. She stood frozen, her eyes wide. Inside the operating room, the figure of a woman in a white coat stood with her back to her, just like the last time. But this time, the figure turned around, and Anne saw her empty, hollow eyes staring back. She screamed and ran down the hallway. When she finally stopped, shaking, Anne knew she couldn't continue working here. Sister Helen's presence wasn't a mere rumor, but a terrifying part of the hospital's reality. The next day, Anne submitted her resignation. She didn't dare tell anyone else about her story, except for Dr. George. After listening, he simply nodded, as if he was used to hearing it. "Sister Helen won't harm you," he said. "She's just trying to finish her work. But I understand if you don't want to stay." And left. But the ghost stories at the hospital continued to spread. Operating Room No. 04 remained abandoned, and night shift workers occasionally caught glimpses of a woman in a white coat standing by the operating table. Restless spirits would linger, existing on the thin boundary between life and death in the cold corridors of the hospital. And each night, as the lights dimmed, whispers would echo down the hallways like voices from another world, reminding those who heard them of the unexplainable. Thank you all for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and encourage me to create more stories like this. Until next time, goodbye.